I think I was going to tell or ask is that initially we didn't plan to record the seminars, but we had a few requests for people who, for various reasons, couldn't make the specific seminars. So we will record this seminar. So far, we haven't decided whether to put it like on public media or just to send to a few chosen people. Are there any objections to see you all appear on public media? If there are any concerns, you can voice it in the chat or something. If you don't want your face to appear somewhere. Alternatively, we could record just the 4 papers without the discussion, if the speakers agree, if the 4 authors agree. I mean, we and Edgar agree. I don't know if Hylke and Miriam have objections. No.
No,
okay.
I think that should be fine.
Okay,
nope,
so
with me.
Yeah, if anyone else has any concerns about discussion part, just write it in the chat that you don't want to be recorded, and then we will record only the papers without discussion, right? You can do it at any point before we start discussion, right? So today we have 4 speakers, which is wonderful. First, we'll have Miriam, who is going to tell us about Scottish horses. And Hylke is going to tell about Arabic horses and the way they are guarded against the evil eye. Something very useful, I think, in your daily life. And then Edgar is going to tell about local customs, local supernatural horses from the Baltic and
from the Baltics and Russia, and about several other supernatural creatures connected to horses and how to protect your horses from them.
Yeah. So again, something very applicable. If you want to make sure your horse is never eaten by a witch at night, then Edgar will tell you what to do. And then I'm going to talk about black horses, demonic horses, which is the kind of belief which starts in the Middle Ages and then goes up to quite recently, and it's really all over Europe and a little bit further east, as they found out. So again, something very practical: how to choose your horse and make sure it doesn't kill you in the process. So. In the announcement, I said that the papers are 10-15 minutes long, but thinks we are all, it's the first seminar, we're all a bit informal. If you run over the limit, I'm not going to put a timer on you and stop you. Okay? It's up to your discretion. And then we'll kind of figure out what to do in later seminars, what works best. So the floor is to our first speaker, Miriam.
Thanks, Anastasija, and thanks very much to you for organising this event, because it's just another wonderful event that we can all enjoy. I'm really pleased to be part of it. I'm going to try and get my slides up, if I can.
Probably you can.
Upload from my computer. Where is it? It's being a bit awkward. Sorry about this, folks. I don't want customized files, I want all files. Thank you. Oh gosh. Quick access. Documents. Sorry about this. I don't know why it's just not bringing it up. It's a bit irritating.
It's okay.
Just bear with me a second. I'm going to grab it, put it on my desktop, and oh dear, we seem to have got the gremlins.
You have a lovely cat in the background.
Oh yes, that's Oscar.
Sure.
You can see him, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, really.
Gosh, is it just not finding my? Let me cancel that and try again. Yeah, just bear with me.
Do we have people in the lobby? Because Carolyn is trying to sign in, but it won't let her.
Yes, I am admitting her right now.
Ah.
So she'll be in time for your paper. Hello,
Really
Carol.
sorry about this, folks.
Hello.
Okay, let me just copy. I don't know why it's just not finding it, basically, but I'm going to paste it on my desktop. And that should do it, hopefully.
I think you need to have the presentation open and then we'll see the presentation. That's the way I do it, usually.
It won't upload it, though. Hang on, it wasn't finding it was the problem, but I've found it now. Posted it on.
Okay.
It just wasn't coming up in my search. There we go. That's it. Sorry about that.
So,
can you see that?
We will shortly, probably.
I think we might in a second. At least your video has disappeared.
Oh, yeah?
Now we see your screen.
Okay. Can you hear me okay?
It says
it's opening.
It's opening something about kelpies.
So, hopefully.
Yes. Sorry about this. It's probably my fault. I probably uploaded too big resolution or something, but
Well,
something is happening. So
Yes.
while
Yeah,
it's
we're
loading,
15.
there you go. There you go. There you go. So today I thought I'd take a look not just at the well-known sprites, beings, the kelpies, which I think a lot of people know about, but also some more unusual ones. So it's not just going to be Scotland, it will also be straying over the border into Northumberland and Durham. Is it okay? Can you all right?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Okay. So I think most people, let's see if I can get the next slide up. There we go. If anybody wants to give a thumbs up to say whether they've come across the kelpies before, I'm sure a lot of people have. I'm going to start with the actual statues of the kelpies, which have been in place on the canal that were created by Andy Scott some years ago. These massive sculptures. You can get an idea of the scale from the size of the people in front of them there. So what interests me about these is he's drawing on various Scottish traditions, not just the tradition of the mysterious spirits, water beings, the kelpies, but also on the real Scottish breed, the Clydesdale. Two Clydesdales were the inspiration for these monumental sculptures. And he's also drawing very, very much on Scottish engineering traditions to create them. Originally, it was intended that they would move to open a lock and let water in and out to allow boats to flow, but that proved to be just too much of a difficult task to do. But there they are now, very beautifully in place. drawing together different strands of Scottish history and belief. And what I like about this is the sort of the drawing together of different ideas from the past and present to create something new. And that's kind of a sub-theme, I think, of this talk. But he described them, the sculptor himself, the creator, Andy Scott, as a vast Meccano set when he put them together. Obviously not entirely on his own. He had a huge team of people working with them, but a very fine job indeed. Okay, so those are the sculptural kelpies that you can actually go and see. Now, the kelpie is an animal, is a water being. That's the main thing about kelpies, is that they live in the water. And we'll get into the details of where they live and what they do a bit later on. But there is this sort of strand of Pictish art, which includes, I hope you can see my cursor moving around there, a mysterious animal that's only known as the Pictish beast. And there it is. That's a very fancy version of it, borrowed from Mr. Google. I don't know whether you can see, but it's got knotwork, a sort of a tail, a curious thing on the front goes up there, and a long, long nose. But it's also got these kind of paddle-like limbs. This is very typical of the Pictish beast. Nobody's really quite sure what it's supposed to represent. There's been all sorts of theories about it, whether it's an elephant, the Loch Ness monster, you know, you name it, they've come up with theories for it. Nobody really knows, but it is an essential part of Pictish art. Pictish art is in itself very mysterious, all sorts of curious symbols, and which are still being interpreted, basically. So there is a lot of discussion about whether there was, and of course you'll all have heard of the famous monster of Loch Ness, whether there was some kind of strange creature that the Picts knew about and represented in their art. The one thing you can say is the Picts were very good at drawing horses, at doing sculptural horses. Here's one, slightly phallic-looking sword scabbard. There it is, a scabbard. That is exactly what it is. A mounted warrior with his spear on his horse. I think you'll notice that the horse is depicted as being on the lateral. It's an ambling horse. That's another one of my interests, but I'm not going to go there in this particular talk. What's very interesting is this essentially pagan, I suppose you could call it, symbol of the Pictish beast also intersects with Christian thought and belief and ideas, because the Saint Columba, of whom some of you may have heard, is said to have dispelled a water beast in the River Ness when he was on his way on a sort of a missionary quest to that area. He performed various miracles, and one of them was overcoming the mysterious water beast in the River Ness. And there's a lovely description from the famous Scottish novelist Nigel Tranter in his book Columba, and it says, Colum saw what he thought at first was a log or a couple of logs bobbing in the current. Then he realised that these were making a distinct V-shaped ripple, much more definite than could be caused by any current. And there were 3 black humps now, not 2. They were moving fast and gleamed a little in sunlight. Even as he stared, from just in front of the first hump and V of the ripple, there was a commotion of the water, and out of it rose still another hump, which turned into an arching long neck, supporting a head shaped like that of a horse, narrow, with flaring nostrils and what could be either ears or small horns set well back. That is your pretty classic description of Nessie, which is how Nigel Tranter's chosen to describe the beast that St. Columba overcame. So I think you've probably all seen cartoons of Nessie looking very, very much like that indeed. So he's taken this classic view, but in the novel he's made it into a real being that encounters the future saint and is overcome by his belief in God. Nigel Tranter claims that he manages to overcome it really by prayer. Okay, but kelpies are not the only water beings in the north. In Northumberland and Durham, we have other creatures. They are known as, two of them are known as dunnies and brags or brags. Those of you who know what a dunny is in Australia will probably find this quite entertaining. But along in Northumberland, right along the Anglo-Scottish border, but mostly on the Northumberland side, a dunny is a shape-shifting, a brownie-like creature. Brownies are sort of household. Normally, they're quite kindly and household creatures, but they can play tricks if you don't treat them right. I think a lot of you will have encountered this in various readings in folklore. You look after them, they'll look after you. But if you don't look after them, then you're in for trouble, and they can play all sorts of tricks in your house. But they can shapeshift, and they sometimes take the form of a horse, which allows people to mount it, only to throw them off in the muddiest or dirtiest part of the road. I can hear everybody's going, these aren't spirits, these are real horses, probably. And it also appears as a plough horse, which vanishes if you take it into the stable. There's a nice theory about this, that it's actually based on a border raider who died. And I've made this very practical. I can see that we're all taking a very practical approach to this today. If you're wandering about in the wilds, this will help you identify which creature is plaguing you. Okay, if you're on the Northumberland side of the border and it's a dunny, it'll sing, and it sings "Cock and Hugh there's gear enough, Collier Hugh there's mare, for I've lost the key of the bounders and I'm ruined forevermore." And this is very kind of reverie sort of song, because gear is stuff that you can steal, basically. So he's saying there's enough stuff to steal, but he's lost the key and he's ruined forevermore. So it does sound a bit like a ghostly reaver. But basically, if you read a creature that looks like a horse wandering the road and it looks like it might lay you on its back, don't do it. It's a dummy. Okay, the next one, Cumberland and Durham, is the brag or brag. And he's usually described, or she is usually described as a goblin, and like the dunny, is a shapeshifter. It can take the shape of a donkey or a horse, and it lets you mount it before chucking you into a pond or a bush and runs off laughing. Okay, they can take a wide range of forms, not just horses, but that's a popular one. How do you identify one? You'll hear it laughing a lot. So you can hear hysterical screeching laughter. That's a brag. Okay. Kelpies, water beings again, mainly in Scotland. They're kind of throughout the Highlands and Islands, not quite so much in the south of Scotland. One appearance is there's a water horse with an extremely long neck. This is kind of favouring the Nessie thing again. But there seem to be several different kinds. Some people say that Kelpies only really live in waterfalls and torrents, whereas another kind, the water horse, lives in rivers and other bodies of water, and a third kind seems to haunt the shore. There are other versions of these in Ireland, on the Isle of Man, and all slightly different. But they all have one thing in common, and that is they're just waiting to drag you under the water. Okay, the Gaelic for Kelpie is Orishk, and the water horses. You have to forgive my pronunciation. I know a little bit Gaelic and Welsh, but not a huge amount. Yeah, Ushka, and you'll recognise the Ushka part because it's the same as the word for whiskey, water wine, Ushka. So how do you know whether it's a Kelpie? The others you can see are quite noisy and or very visual, whereas the Kelpie or the water horse will just be lurking in the water, and you don't have much chance because it'll jump out and get you. They're silent and extremely dangerous. Okay, so try praying, basically, if you see those ripples, and cue the Jaws theme. Okay. One major strand of Scottish folklore, in particular, is the idea of the Queen of Elfland, who likes young men and tends to carry them off to her home in the hills. Sometimes the Queen of Elfland, sometimes the Queen of Fairyland, but she always manifests herself as riding on a very proud and noble horse, beautifully dressed, and she lures young men that are loitering in the wrong place, basically, away. One of the most famous is Tam Lin. This is a story that's known right throughout the border. You can see that when you've been to Elfland, your life is changed. It never gets back to the way it was. The steed that my true love rides on is lighter than the wind. Priscilla he has shod before, with burning gold behind. He's got silver shoes on the front and gold on the back. And there's a lovely story for the Border River ballads about shoeing your horses the wrong way round, so that people don't know which way you're going, and it fools them into not realizing that you're a raider. It's a good story, that one. Okay, so shoes are very important. Could have done a full one on shoes, but decided I would do this instead. How do you identify the Queen of Elfland if she's riding along and you think she's going to carry you off? Her skirt was of the grass green silk, her mantle of the velvet fine. At Hylke Hettema of her horse's mane, each strand of her horse's mane, hung 50 silver bells and 9. The grey horses, white horses. Her palfrey was a dapple grey. Hylke one never sigh, ne sigh never none. As does the sun on summer's day, that fair lady herself so shone. Okay, so that's the Queen of Elfland. Watch out for her. Horses are very important in the elvish strand of folklore. This is a quote from my supervisor, who I'm absolutely gratified to say is an expert on folklore, an award-winning expert. The ballad fairies are repeatedly portrayed as lavishly adorned and accoutred beings. They live in opulent courts, the most delectable foods, and dress in sumptuous clothes. They own or guard treasures rich beyond the imagination of most mortals, outfitting even their horses in golden bridles and silver bells. The horses are usually milk white and run swifter than the wind. The fairies were emphatically aristocratic, and this is how you know. They're actually, it's often been said they are a reflection of the real aristocrats. You know, this is what those, it's possibly even a slightly satirical take on it. Okay, a third strand that I'm going to introduce is this idea of having skulls in churches. Again, you've got this crossover, this intersection between Christian and pagan belief. This is from Elsdon in Northumberland, St Cuthbert's Church. St Cuthbert's a really, really important saint in the north of England and Scotland. Even post-Reformation, he really lost none of his appeal. So these 3 skulls were found in the bell tower, and nobody's quite sure. That's been suggested an old pagan custom, or this idea that you'll come across, I think, in Irish contexts, that they do something for the acoustics. Okay, I don't know if any of you come across that one before, but that's yet another strand of horses in folklore, the actual physical remains of the horses being utilized. Okay, now even once in Enlightenment Scotland, the appeal of the supernatural, of folklore, never disappeared. 3 of the great writers, Walter Scott, Rabbie Burns, and James Hogg, all drew on the supernatural very much for their stories, and they gained their knowledge of the supernatural from the women folk around them. This is where they learned it, and they put it into what's effectively seen now as, you know, art, but it came from the woman's side. I've put this one up because this is going to be part of the theme for our forthcoming Saints and Sinners volume. I'm focusing on this, and also with Halloween coming up, you know, it seemed like a good image to put in, basically. Again, in Tam Lin, the poem, the night it is good Halloween when fairy folk will ride. So you need to be especially careful at Halloween. The best thing to do if you are going to be out and about on Halloween, to avoid being caught by any of the creatures that lurk either in water or that are going to ride down and seduce you away in some form or other, is travel in daylight and keep company with other people. That's the best recommendation I can make. And on a final thought on the water horse theme, an interesting comment that, again, my supervisor had in her work was that if you encounter a land-based being in folklore, Scottish folklore, North of England folklore, you're likely to come out of it okay. You might be trapped underground for 7 years, but you will eventually be rescued. Somebody will come and rescue you. But if you have an encounter with a water-based animal, it's almost water-based supernatural being. It's almost inevitably, in fact, almost all is always, I think, fatal. You aren't going to come out of that encounter. Okay, so that's something to bear in mind. If you, I think it's probably just wise to be careful around water and frighten people by saying the kelpie will get you or whatever. It's a good way of making sure, in particular, that small children don't look about with water when they shouldn't. Okay, so that's me. I think I better move over now and make way for some more. So thanks very much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed that.
Thank you very much, Miriam. It was really fascinating. There were lots of comments coming up in the chat, and yes, I think there would be some parallels with the later papers as well. And yeah, but very much a Halloween theme. When I was making the list, I didn't think about Halloween, but I think it matches very well with the Halloween coming up. So our next...
Yes, and I think I'm looking forward to yours, because I think there will be parallels, certainly, yeah.
Yeah, so let's move on to Hylke's paper, who is going to tell you how to protect your horse against other evil spirits.
Okay.
Can you all see my screen? Yeah, okay, let's start then. I won't be seeing you guys, so any questions, please put them in the comment box. So yeah, my paper is a little bit different, I think, from the other papers, because it's not about the horses that represent a certain supernatural or evil spirits or good spirits. Although there are, in Arabic literature, there are references that jinn, which are spirits, good and bad in the Islamic tradition, will only ride purebred horses, which is a very strange claim, and I'm still looking into that with a friend of mine who's also really interested in this particular claim of horses and the supernatural. What I wanted to show you today is something that has fascinated me when I first arrived in the Middle East 11 years ago. Everybody decorates their horses, I think. I mean, we're all guilty of buying the next saddle pad and all of these things. But when I arrived to Egypt, I often encountered donkeys wearing these very interesting necklaces. And I kept seeing them on donkeys, on horses, and not only on fancy horses owned by rich people, but also just people in the street who would decorate their horses. And it has different kinds of shapes. There is braided cotton, there is beads, there is wool, tassels, all kinds of creative, artistic kind of embellishments, basically. And I started asking some local horse and donkey owners, why would they do that? And then they told me this is to protect our animals from al-ain, the eye, or the evil eye. And the first thing that actually came to my mind, being very Western and not much exposed to this kind of culture, was the big eye that we see in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, you know, the one that sits in the tower and that sees everything. But yeah, on a side note, I think that's maybe not quite the concept of this evil eye, but I do think the evil eye exists in many more cultures, and I'm looking forward to hear your input on this. in the Quran, you will find that there is a kind of jealousy, and this is basically what it comes to. Envy and jealousy are not very unfamiliar to all of us, I think, but in this case, the emotions can harm the victim. So if I'm jealous of you, I put my evil eye on something you have, and generally this goes to like food. If you have something I would like to eat, you will suddenly drop it, or there will be an accident with it. And you can imagine all of the things. You just have a new car, you show this to many people, and suddenly you have a flat tire. This is the kind of evil eye that we're talking about. It is transferable and is often described in Islamic sources as a disease, because general belief is that a person can be struck by the evil eye of another. Physical and emotional fatigue, cramps, headaches, hair loss, diarrhea, and many other ailments and disorders are ascribed to the evil eye. But of course, it cannot only affect humans, it can affect animals too. I've often actually witnessed people telling me, yeah, my horse has ringworm or strangles, and it's because this person gave me or my horse an evil eye. Well, so in the Quran, there's this jealousy, or the concept of the evil eye can be found in the Quran. So people make their horses wear necklaces, which are called kalada. And well, this is a typical example that you will see when you visit the pyramids, but also in private settings, you can see they make their horses wear really beautiful necklaces of different colors of beads. And there is a tradition. It has been around for a long time. I mean, if you look at many older photos from the Middle East, you will see that donkeys and horses, they will wear these things. Again, you see on the left, it's more like beads, real jewelry, it seems. And on the right, it's a bit more simple. And Muslims will tell you that the Prophet himself, Prophet Muhammad, has said that the evil eye exists. It says al-ayn haqq, which means it's real, it's a truth. But when I started looking at it, are there then also hadith that tell you what to do when you got evil eye? And I didn't really find anything. People will tell you that maybe you need to take a bath, or you need to recite the Quran, or you need to pray. But it's very hard to get rid of it. And I also found contradicting evidence that the Prophet also said that you should not leave any necklaces or strings or whatever on a camel's neck, because probably this might cause harm. And if you look at the commentary by exegetes on these texts, it's often explained that this is also where the Prophet is making a clear cut from the Bedouin tradition. And I think we all know this. I mean, this is what mostly is known to us, that Arab horses are depicted wearing all kinds of sorts of embellishments, not only necklaces, but also chest pieces and tassels everywhere. So it might be related to this. I mean, I put a question mark in, because in one way we see this across the Middle East as being an Arab tradition. We see it as being an Islamic tradition. And what I want to discuss with you here today is that perhaps we should broaden our vision, because one of the interesting things that I found talking to an Egyptologist is that they found this thing, I'm just calling it a thing, in a stables. They said that they found this in horse stables, and that it was decoration of the harness. So the research paper published about this particular piece of beads suggested that this would be hanging off the harness on the side of the horse, where both of us were looking at each other like that would be really weird and dangerous, because it would be in a place where the horse's leg could get stuck in it. So then I started reading a little bit more about what is it. So it is 95 centimeters long. It is enclosed. It has a bit of the form of a collar. It's bent. There are 35 beads on it, and all of them have eyes. I mean, they don't all have the same eyes, but there's very similar eyes to the ones that we see on many of these embellishments on current day horses across the Middle East. So especially with the 95 centimeters, just a few weeks prior to this find, I had been ordering actually a necklace or a breast piece for one of my Arab horses, which was also 95 centimeters. So this is when one and one came together, and we figured out that this would probably be a necklace from ancient Egypt for a horse or a donkey. My Arab stallion was kind of small, so that's why I'm saying donkey is possible. And then if we start thinking about it, so maybe this is not an Arab tradition or an Islamic tradition, where else could this be rooted? So credits go to Carolyn shooting pictures of Danny, who is showing his necklace that she brought from Greece. And on the right, you see some Greek horses. I think they're wearing necklaces. I mean, it's kind of tricky. I mean, is this tack or not? But at least the second one from the right seems to be wearing something very blue. And you can see that even in the Greek necklace, you see very clear the eye that is said to protect from the evil eye. And then Danny again showing off a necklace that came from Turkey. And on the right, well, the very famous Turkic horse also wearing very prominently a beaded necklace. Well, I think several actually, but at least one beaded necklace with the enormous eye bead on it, which is called the Kharza Zarqa in Arabic, the blue stone. And then there is, of course, Roman evidence of wearing necklaces. On the left, you can see the horse clearly wearing very big beads on his neck. In the mosaics, you can see that all of them are basically wearing some embellishment on the neck. Not sure if this is beads or jewelry. But here on the right is a picture I took in the museum in Xanten, Germany, where they found this as part of Roman remains. And this is also, again, blue. So there must be something with the color blue that's related to, you know, protecting oneself from the evil eye. Assyrian depictions also show us very clearly some beaded necklaces. They also have other necklaces, but we see again the same beads. And one of the things that I would really, really like to research more is the henna. And I love the picture that was provided to me by Professor Jamal Husseini, who gave me this photo that he took in Morocco, and on this horse is written "Trust in Allah, Tawakkal Allah," where the henna in itself is viewed as a protective material, but they also choose to write certain, like, yeah, let's not call it spells, but like certain sentences they use in their prayers to ward off evil. I love the photo on the right of the donkey in Bahrain. They're racing donkeys. This is a race. And you can see like the donkey behind also has a similar pattern. So it's a certain kind of belief that if you paint your donkey with this henna, that body part is protected from evil. Many people in endurance will recognize that actually in the Middle East, in endurance, people will paint their horses' lower legs with henna, very much like this horse in Iran. And here also, I feel that there's a combination of the amulets. So we see the necklaces coming back, and we also see the henna. So it's like added protection. And a donkey with very funky hair. And then, of course, we come to the tradition in India. I mean, it's a very old tradition. I could not really find ancient manuscripts where you could see this very clearly. It's the same for Persian manuscripts. We all know that there are very old Persian manuscripts on horses, but I could not find one that actually had defined images where you could see these either necklaces or henna. But these horses in India, clearly they have. One a bit more than the other. And we do know from the 18th century that it was something that Western people really like found annoying, that these people kept painting their horses. But it's interesting that in a way it's a tradition of marking your horse in a certain way, because you can see there is actually an article about the red-footed horses of India, where they always paint the lower legs and a little bit of the tail, or they paint the mane or the tail. So it's like a pattern. So there's a sort of like a way to do it in order to have it right. One thing I was really sad about, I could not find a picture in my collection of the henna hand on the horses, because what you see in the Middle East, and especially in North Africa, is people will paint their hands red with henna, and while it's still wet, they will paint a handprint on their horse, mostly on its back end or on the neck. And this has to do with the tradition of the hand of Fatma, which is also a sort of an amulet. I mean, you can buy these little hands everywhere. I think they're very popular in Europe at the moment, to wear them as earrings or as a hand. And I think they're called Hamza hands in Europe, but in the Middle East, they're known as the hands of Fatma, which also are known to offer protection. If time permits, I would like to share some experience of myself with the evil eye. I don't know if there are any questions, or oh no, we're saving the questions for later. Yes.
Hylke, so the questions will go later. There was one question in the chat for a reference for this amulet, so maybe you can put this in the chat as well.
The ancient Egyptian one.
Yes, the one which was found in the stable, I guess.
Oh yeah, I have a link to the research. Yeah.
Yes, so this you can share, and then for the rest, for the other questions, I think we can kind of wait for the discussion. If you have any resources, you can share them, of course. Now let's go to our third paper. So we'll swap places.
Yes.
Edgar is going to open his presentation.
It is okay. So this one is open. So you should see my presentation now, probably.
You should see he's got only 3 slides.
Well, yes, I do.
Because he's a lawyer, he's very concise. He's not a humanitarian.
Yeah, so what I'm going to present, let's say, bits and pieces which I found during my research for the upcoming chapter in Saints and Sinners volume, which I couldn't exactly fit in the chapter itself, because it's either outside the scope or I could not put a footnote on it, because I saw it myself as not exactly a valid reference.
Maybe.
Well, so it's a sample of one, so it's that is hardly relevant. Although I hope it was interesting to me, and I hope it will be interesting to you. So, how it's going to go? When I was preparing this presentation, it was all the time trying to shift away from presenting work in progress towards a storytelling event, but well, let's see how it went eventually. What I want to talk about are the 2 supernatural creatures, which, while very different, share a strong connection to horses. And one of them is from the Russian folklore, and the other is from Latvia. So, the first one, the Russian one, would be Master of Waters, called in Russian Vodяной. You see in the slide how it is pronounced. Approximately. This creature is a keeper of and ruler of waters, fresh waters, because the sea in few regions of actual Russia, which actually face the sea is inhabited by different creatures. This one doesn't live in salt water, only fresh ones. And the image on the top of the slide is one of his, according to Folklore, favorite places, a mill pond. Actually, Vodino is supposed to live in the deepest part of any given body of water. And this the belief in this creature is in Russia from western regions to all the way to Siberia, and in other Slavic nations as well. There is such a creature in Poland and Czech beliefs, etc. So it is associated with water creatures first and foremost, especially fish, and among the species, especially the catfish. You'll see further on, it's often associated with the color black, and catfish is black, at least on the top. Also, the catfish loves deep places. Or with waterfowl, especially swans, which are not exactly black, but probably because they are the largest. And among the terrestrial creatures, with horses. Vodino is shape-shifting, like Kelpis mentioned before. It can turn itself into a horse, or it can turn into a human. But other humans can sometimes recognize it, and it is a belief which is Russian fairies, that while they all can take human forms, they always are somehow off, somehow strange. Sometimes they put clothes the wrong side out, or they put shoes on the wrong feet. In Vodino's case, he sometimes has hooves. And unlike the traditional image of the demon, which has cloven hooves, like a goat or a cow, this one has horse's feet. All these horse's feet. So.
It's also dripping water.
Oh yes, it is also dripping water from underneath its clothes. So. It's also believed to possess herds of horses, or sometimes cattle of its own, which brave enough human can actually steal. These horses are traditionally believed to be pastured by their supernatural owner at the mouths of the rivers, where they meet the sea or the lake or another bigger river. And if one sees them and isn't afraid to run around the entire herd carrying an icon, then these horses will recognize that these are the horses, which is actually a share of the Russian spirits. For example, a brave hunter can steal a concubine or stepdaughter from the guardian of the forests, who is also believed to be exceptionally beautiful, exceptionally wise, and capable, and found in all manners of herb lore. So, belief in the Vodyanoi is very persistent. It is, and until 19th century, there were sacrifices to it recorded. For example, on the occasion of construction of the new water mill, or to boost the fertility of the crops or summon rain, because the keeper of waters also keeps the water in the sky, the rain, under his command. The sacrifices included black animals, usually roosters or pigs, or indeed horses, or parts of the horses' skulls thrown into rivers, or the entire horse killed for the occasion and drowned in water, or at least the head of a freshly slaughtered horse. And in some regions of Russia, even symbolic human sacrifices are recorded. A straw man was made, dressed in human clothes, put in the old boat, which was towed to the middle of the lake, where it was the boat along with the straw man was sunk. Associated Christian holidays associated with the Vodinoi are both feasts of Saint Nicholas, May 22nd, Nicholas of the spring, and December 19th, Nicholas of the winter. Probably association is due to connection between Saint Nicholas and water, although his particular domain is sea travel. So it is a characteristic feature of Russian folk beliefs to associate certain Christian holidays and remembrance days with entities from pre-Christian folklore, which results in sometimes certain feast days achieving more prominence than they have in an actual church calendar. So, Vodinai can also be summoned for divination purposes, but it is one of the terrible kinds of divinations which are believed to be dangerous for diviner. And it takes place as the most reliable divinations do in Russian folklore between Christmas and Epiphany, when someone wishing to know his future should take a horse's hide, take it to the river, make the hole in the ice, draw a circle around the horse's hide, sit on the hide and say some spells, upon which Vodinai shall appear and drag the person by the horse's hide and show his future house, future events in his or her life, etc. So, like many other spirits in other cultures as well, not just in Russia, Vodinai can be both helpful and, well, when he's angry, he goes beyond mischievous. He's one of the more dangerous spirits. He can be outright murderous, causing floods, drowning particular persons who insulted him somehow by throwing rubbish in the river, for example. So, but when he's helpful, he, as I said before, has fertility of the land under control, can summon fish to fishermen's nets, and probably because of this supposed importance and power, these sacrifices were so long-lasting. And even nowadays, you can sometimes hear strange, inexplicable incidents involving water connected to water-dwelling spirits. So, so yes, moving further to Latvia, where we have a spirit of a different kind, a kind of a ghost. Its Latvian name is Lietuvens, and I think we have one Latvian speaker here apart from us, and who to them I usually say he has no connection to either Rain or Lithuanians, because the words sound familiar. And most likely this name is borrowed from Russian, which in Russian folklore is named for, similar sounding word, is named for another malicious spirit, although the other attributes are not shared at all. So but we'll leave that probably for the discussion if somebody is interested. So in Latvian beliefs, Lietuvens is the soul of an untimely deceased person, a suicide, an alcoholic who drank himself to death, or most commonly an unbaptized child. Strangely, this creature, although being a ghost, is mortal. It ceases to exist when the person whom he was, whose soul he is destined to die. It is believed among the Latvians and among the Russians as well that every person has the predestined length of his or her supposed life. So, and this unfortunate soul wanders about, attacking the living, especially humans, whom he strangles, and horses. And if a horse is found covered in foam as if after hard work, it was believed that it has been ridden by a Lietuvens. The day of the summer solstice was believed to be especially dangerous in this respect, and it was common belief recorded in late 19th century throughout Latvia that horses kept in night, because otherwise they are almost certain to be ridden by ghosts and witches. However, it can attack horses on any other day or other night just as well. So if you find your horse thus abused, you can protect it from further attacks by making a symbol called Lietuvena Krust's ghost cross on the stable doors, just carving it there, or on the horse's coat with the blunt side of the knife. It's not like you're giving scars to a horse, just making it in its hair. How does this cross look is not known. The 19th century ethnographers only record that it was either 5 or 8 pointed. Later researchers only record that it existed. If you Google this Lietuvena Krust nowadays, the results will include this red symbol on the bottom, because it is 8 pointed, or a pentagram, because it is probably 5 pointed, although it's hardly a cross, it is a star. And this symbol on the slide as well is considered to be a star. It is called Auseklis, and it represents the morning star. Although either option to me seems, well, for a pentagram seems questionable, because, as I said, pentagram is a star, and this symbol, although nowadays synonymous with Latvian culture, is considered a borrowing from Finns or Estonians, and a rather late one. It doesn't appear until the late 17th, maybe 18th century. Although, on the other hand, the morning star was revered by the Balts, Latvians and Lithuanians alike, from time immemorial. So, alternatively, this green symbol above is called Mara's cross. Mara is presumably a pre-Christian deity, who in folk songs is remembered mostly as a protector of cattle, rather than horses, which are the domain of the sky god. However, she has also some connection to underworld, so using that one probably would make also sense. Who else can reign in unruly ghosts if not the mistress of the underworld? And this particular symbol I have actually seen on an antique horse harness, etched into rivets which held the brow band. So, and although horses stopped being the major part of agriculture and thus references to attacks on them are not common nowadays. The last attack on a human which I've seen was from the folklore study conducted 10 years ago, I think, that is published. So maybe ethnographers working now record. So there it is. Two quite different spirits, but nevertheless somewhat connected to horses. One cares for them, the other attacks them. I think it. And speaking of demonic horses, I will now give floor to Anastasija, who will speak about demonic black horse.
Okay, so we are moving geographically back to Europe.
Well, we are in Europe.
Some say Russia is not Europe.
Well, Siberia is not Europe.
You never know. Russia is Russia. Okay, so why do I still have your presentation? Let me do it this way. Look.
No, you should stop. Yes. Stop presenting. Probably, and then present again.
So, I'll just shut your presentation. Close it. Vamos. So we are going to demonic black horse. So I first came across the demonic black horse when I was studying French Arthurian literature, the Caisse del Saint Graal, which is an early 13th century romance written by either a Cistercian monk or someone who was close to Cistercian culture. And in the romance you have Arthurian knights who are questing for the Holy Grail, and on the way they meet many temptations. Of course, those who are not holy enough, they don't make it, and those who are a bit better than everyone else makes it. One of the heroes is Percival, who doesn't quite make it to the Holy Grail, but he's one of the elect knights. So Galahad is the one who is destined to find the Holy Grail. And Galahad is the one who comes out of all of trials and tribulations because he's basically sinless, almost like Jesus Christ. Percival is a little bit more earthly. He's pure in body, but not so pure in his mind. Let's put it this way. So on the way, he meets with one temptation, and that's the episode. While chasing Galahad, whom he doesn't recognize, but he recognizes it's the knight whom he should chase because it's the chosen one, he loses his horse. He's really upset. Then on the way, there is another knight from whom he kind of tries to borrow a horse. The knight doesn't listen to him. He managed to borrow the horse from from a servant from whom the knight had robbed the horse place, and then he encounters the knight, and the knight just kills the horse Percival is riding. So he's horseless 2 times. And he's really desperate because he wants to pursue Galahad, and he just feels he's losing his chances with every minute. And he spends all night in despair. And of course, despair is when you have temptations. So at the end of the night, there is a fair lady coming to the forest, and he's just telling, "I know what you're missing. I know what you need. You need a horse, right?" So he says, "Yes, I need a horse. Will you do anything I ask for if I bring you a horse which will take you anywhere you want?" And he says, "Yes." Well, you shouldn't promise things to a strange ladies without finding out first what you're promising. In fact, he promises to give his soul. And what happens, she comes back out of nowhere. He doesn't question where she was going, where she has this one. She's coming back, and she's leading with her a great and marvelous horse. It was so black it was marvel to see. So you see in the French original the word merveille. It's coming back 2 times, so translates as marvel or miracle sometimes in some context. You see that there is a sense of wonder. And Percival looks at the horse, and he's just has so much distaste. He's just hating it. Adore is the word. Well, against his better judgment, this is his instinct. He takes the horse, he mounts it, and he goes first. So you see this. There is this episode with the lady and Percival mounting the horse. It comes from an Italian manuscript, which actually has many illustrations. You see the horse is pitch black. One translation of this romance by Thomas Mallory in his Le Mort d'Arthur, it says clearly the horse was as black as a blackberry, I think. And in another place he says the horse was as black as a bear. So there are at 2 points he refers to this blackness. So blackness without any white markings is the key. And he writes the problem is the horse is just bolting off that without hearing him. So the lady hasn't really fulfilled her promise. She said the horse will take him where he wants to go. Well, the horse isn't taking him where he wants to go. It's taking him in some other direction. It's taking him to hell, probably. And he's riding without any means of control. I'm sure we've been all in this situation where the horse just bites the bit and goes for it. And it goes so fast that Percival probably doesn't really want to jump off. Well, it's going until it sees and comes into a valley, and then sees a great river, and the horse just goes straight for this. Percival realizes he's going to drown, so he makes the sign of the cross, and what happens? You've heard the talk about Miriam. So he does the right thing, right? So what happens now? Well, the horse just disappears. Percival, luckily, he doesn't fall into the water. He falls onto a desert island. And that's the point where he realizes it was an enemy. So that's the episode. The horse doesn't just disappear. It disappears crying and hissing and making these devilish noises. So at this point, Percival realizes it was the devil. Up to this point, the text calls it a horse, le cheval. That's it. And at this point, it's clear it's the devil. And it bursts into flames. How spectacular, just for Halloween. And it seems the water seems to burn. So the horse disappears to hell. Percival has many adventures before he gets away from the island, and of course he's nearly loses his soul, but he doesn't. So like St. Columba, Percival does the right thing. He makes the sign of the cross, and it helps. One of the scholars who was studying this romance suggested that because many of Arthurian romances, they were inspired by Celtic themes in one way or another. So this might have been a Kelpie. So it might have been a Kelpie originally, but what I'm not convinced is that for the medieval reader it wouldn't be a Kelpie, because The romance was composed in Middle French. It was consumed by people who were very much into Middle French culture. So the more immediate association would be the black horse as the devil. It might have originally been a Kelpie, of course, or some Celtic water spirit. But as the author of the romance makes it clear, it's the devil, right? And what's very interesting is that in the Hippietic treatises and miscellaneous manuscripts, just collecting all kinds of texts on all kinds of topics, we have a list of horse rankings. So one of these manuscripts, late 15th century, so late 15th centuries. It includes a horse ranking going from white, silver gray, to black. So white is the color of Christ's horse, and black is the color of the demonic horse. What the manuscript says clearly is that a coal black horse that bears no white mark is perilous for, and he can, if he continue along with any man, he will drench his master, or else he will slew him or do some manner of mischief. So what struck me here is there is a clear parallel. A black horse in both cases, no white marks, and it tries to drown his rider. Just what happened to Percival. Or do some other manner of mischief, indeed. So it's clearly a belief which is circulating. And now I turn to my other example. So this part of my study, it comes from my published research about the prices of horses, of elite horses in late medieval England. It was published in the volume The Horse in Pre-Modern European Culture, which just came out this year. And now the next thing, okay, so the next thing comes from research which is not published, not by myself, but I had the privilege of reading an article by Scott Manning, which is now in the review stage in the volume Saints and Sinners, which is in production. It's edited by Miriam Bibby, and it's about Joan of Arc. What I found very curious is that it also mentions one episode in the career of Joan of Arc, where she encounters a cool black horse which is behaving in a weird way. So what Scott Manning says is that he refers to 1429 from the town of Sels, so a month after the lifting of the siege. Two noble brothers were amazed when John encountered a big charger that wouldn't allow her to mount. She instructed that the horse be led to a cross in front of the church, and there she mounted without him moving, as if he had been tied. Well, Scott Manning's interpretation is that basically John needed John, as a very good horsewoman by this point, she had lots of experience with horses. She realized the horse needs a change of sex, a bit excited by the crowd, and that's why she went to a different place where it was a bit calmer, and then she mounted. Well, of course, it could be, actually my interpretation is different. It goes back to what I have read about all those black horses. It could be both, actually. So on the one hand, John realizes that it's not the right place to calm an excited horse. On the other hand, if you know horses, you know they read your emotions and they respond to them. Many of them do. So basically, John might have been a bit worried herself. So church is where you kind of relax, and for John it's particularly important. She's praying in front of the cross. She's standing in front of the cross, and she calms herself. And as she is calmer, the horses gets calmer as well. So horses basically they react to the rider or to the handler. If the handler feels nervous, the horse who recognizes the emotion, so it thinks, oh, there is danger, let's run. But for observers, there would clearly be a link between a black horse and a black horse which is taken to the cross, and at the cross the horse behaves. So This episode is cited by 2 eyewitnesses who left some records about Joan of Arc. So it was clearly important, it was clearly impressive. There was no commentary as to what happened. These eyewitnesses made no commentary. But I think for anyone who looked at it, there would be this idea of Joan triumphing over an evil spirit, black spirit in some way. And now we suddenly make a move, a jump actually, a few centuries later, and quite a few miles to the east, yes. So, and Gogol is a classical Russian author, and his first major work for which he became famous was a collection of folk tales, so to say. The folk tales were published under the name of a beekeeper, the red-headed Panko. Well, I guess everyone guessed that it's Gogol, but he imitated the style of narration and the stories as if these are stories which were told at the farmstead of this beekeeper in his house, and the beekeeper kind of recorded them. He even used some local words which were typical for this Ukrainian dialect, and he included a glossary. So it's kind of folk tales, and I mean, this is plots themselves. They would have been perceived as folk tales. He didn't quite invent them. At least he took the motifs from somewhere. Otherwise, it wouldn't be such a success. So a little bit of an aside, we had this discussion on Facebook recently about the canon of art made by white straight men. So Gogol is white, and he's certainly a man. There is some doubt as to what
As to his straightness.
As to his straightness. He probably wasn't gay, but he was a bit queer, so to say. So I think it's okay to have him in this talk. At least we have someone who isn't a straight white man. So in these illustrations, they were quite early illustrations to his book. There are 2 stories. On the left-hand side, there is a story of Kozak whose horse is stolen by witches and demons. But I wanted to tell about the illustration on the right-hand side, where a man rides a horse. This is a really funny story. It's called the Christmas Eve, or the night before Christmas, and it's one of the school classics. We read school still. I think it sounds better with rereading. So anyone who feels a bit down during the lockdown, the COVID crisis, you should read these stories. One of them, it's like they alternate. One of them is scary, the next one is funny. They all involve supernatural beings and supernatural creatures, but this one is about a demon, or how do you translate short, who is fooled by the humans. Yes, in this case by a blacksmith. So it's worth telling the whole story in full. There is a blacksmith who falls in love with a very proud, very arrogant, but very beautiful girl, and the girl who is making fun of him says, "Oh, if he brings me the shoes or the boots which the emperor is wearing, I'll marry him." And he said, of course, the way everyone hears, and then she makes some more fun of him. So he goes away very desperate, and he thinks about suicide, but he's a very God-fearing man, and he doesn't really want to commit suicide. Instead, he turns to a wizard, who is known as a wizard, a guy who kind of makes friends with evil forces, evil demons. He comes there, and he is accompanied by a demon who is just sitting on his shoulder and waiting to snatch the soul of this God-fearing Christian man, the most Christian in the whole village. And the wizard says, "Well, the man who is carrying a demon on his left or behind his back doesn't need my help." So the blacksmith is a bit puzzled, but he goes away. And what happens next is snatches the demon by the tail. And says, "Okay, now you carry me to the capital of Russia, to St. Petersburg.
Or else I will make sign of the cross over you."
Yeah, or I'll make the sign of the cross over you. So it's the remedy which doesn't fail, it seems,
across Europe.
So he jumps on the demon, who is
transformed.
No, he's not transformed yet. And the demon just flies, grunting a bit under the weight of this blacksmith, because the blacksmith obviously is a very heavy man. So they fly across the sky, they see some witches in the clouds and some other demons, and then they approach St. Petersburg, and as they are about to descend, the demon changes his shape to a black horse. She looks normal, because they ride through St. Petersburg, and they feel fine. No one recognizes it. In the illustration, you see that this black horse is demonic, so it's probably in the process of shape-shifting. To cut a long story short, the blacksmith obtains the boots, comes back, and in the meantime, the girl who realized the blacksmith might have committed suicide just falls in love with him and says, "I'll marry you without any boots." And it's happy ending for everyone except the poor demon, because the blacksmith doesn't really let him go at once. He gives him a big kick in the butt. What's interesting, it's a very humorous account, but again, it includes this motif of black horse who isn't really a black horse, but a demon who has changed himself into a black horse. And in Russian and in Latvian folklore, there is this creature, Chorto Vels, who isn't quite the devil, but it's kind of small demon who might be dangerous, but who is really, these demons are everywhere, and sometimes they're really dangerous, and they make Christians perish, and sometimes they are fooled by Christians, as with these crafty blacksmiths. So on the left-hand side illustration, you see one of those little demons just there, as well as a horse-like creature. So that's the end of my talk, and I'll stop sharing, and it's the end of all 4 talks. Now we have the discussion open. For those who came in late, this talk is being recorded, so if you have any objections to being recorded, just voice your objections in the chat. We'll stop recording. But the authors have agreed, so up now we had no problems with this. Any questions, comments? Miriam, yes. So Miriam, I'm happy that at least someone knows about this. Yes. So Jean's comment about Alexander the Great and Bucephalus. Yes. Scott Manning was actually referring to this episode as well, which is valid. I mean, that's one interpretation which is valid, but I think for any onlooker, there might have been this idea of Joan of Arc and kind of black horse, which is a demon, and the cross. So if you want to ask a question, you can unmute yourself. I think I didn't mute anyone by force.
No.
Or you can pop the question in the chat, or just go ahead. Yeah. The floor is open. We have around half an hour for discussion. So.
Well, one of the things I noticed that in many cases, and it's sort of like evidence of supernatural stuff. But I mentioned shortly the jinn. They also shapeshift. In Islamic tradition, jinn are certain creatures or spirits, and they shapeshift, but it's defined as behavior, not as evidence of something supernatural. Because superstition in Islam is not allowed, so you cannot believe that a jinn has divine powers. So it's very interesting to see the difference in this kind of cultural aspect.
Yeah. So that's another interesting thing. Any more comments? So there was this interesting remark about white versus black horse. Of course, we know that gray horses are all born more or less black, and then in time they become whiter and whiter. I'm not sure what to make of it, but surely a silver white horse would be a kind of adult individual. So it's proper to have a silver white horse as a trusty companion. In a way, it's also kind of Christian paradigm. We all are born sinners, and then we kind of purify, or we don't. But as all people are born sinners, then you can kind of become white by good behavior. And there is a lot of parallel between the rider and horse. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the colour thing's interesting in Tamlin, because it's true that mostly the horses that the elvish folk or the fairies ride are white, pure white, and they're very highly decorated. But when his lover Jean goes to rescue him from the Queen of Elfland, he says to her, "You'll see a procession of people. It's one special night of the year. You know, it's always a special night. It's always Midsummer Night or Halloween, or I forget which night it is. I think, but the two focal points are Midsummer and the winter solstice of the poems mostly. But she goes to rescue him, and he says, "You'll see 3 groups of people. The first one, there'll be a black horse. In the second group, there'll be a bay horse, and in the third group, there'll be a white horse, and I'll be riding the white horse. And then you should seize me and hold me. Whatever happens, don't let me go." So it's interesting that on that occasion, the fairy folk are now riding black and bay horses, and he's on the white horse, and that kind of marks him out, makes him visible. But I was just thinking, you know, C.S. Lewis's story, The Silver Chair? I don't know if any of you know that one. If you remember, the prince is taken underground, and he lives with a sort of an equivalent, really, of an elvish queen who turns into a terrible worm at the end of the story. Now, I could have talked about worms and horses in folklore as well, because that's an interesting thread, but that's something different. But in that one, when they ride out, she's always on a pure white horse, beautifully decorated, like the Queen of Elfland. And he's the silent black knight in black armor. And when they leave the underworld at the end of the book, I think they take the 2 horses, the black and the white horse, from the underworld, effectively. I'm sure Lewis was thinking of material like the child ballads or the elf ballads in particular when he wrote that tale, because it's just so reminiscent of a lot of border material. You know, you have to be thinking of it, I'm sure. Yeah.
Well, I think it's also there is Christian symbolism behind it as well.
Yes, exactly.
This being Lewis,
yeah,
quite certainly.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just thinking generally, but wondering about in Islamic tradition, because of course the Arabian horse, I suppose perhaps a majority are born dark now and mature to white. Do we find those rather severe color distinctions and pronouncements of good versus evil in those traditions and oral histories and written histories as we do in the Christian ones?
Any comments about kind of color and adaptation, value judgment in the Islamic tradition of the horse? Okay, are you with us?
Yes, I'm hearing you. Was there a question?
Yes, there was a question about the color and value judgment in Islamic tradition. So
of the horse code.
Yes.
Yes. Usually it's based on prophetic traditions, on ahadith. So the chestnut horse is often said to be favorite because the prophet had, for some reason, he had a lot of chestnuts. I don't think he picked chestnuts, but people started saying that this is favorite color, and that race horses who are chestnut are faster. because there is an episode where he rides around the city on a chestnut horse called El Sak, which means running water. So the horse is fast as running water, to make sure that there are no enemies around the city. And ever since that moment, they started saying that this was his favorite horse. So chestnut is the best color. It changes over time because there's this discussion in the Middle East that develops whether or not gray horses are more valuable. But in general, like if you look at like the only feral population of desert horses, there are no grays, there are no multicolors. There's just chestnut, there's bay, and there's I think 2 or 3 blacks in the population of 150 horses. So it's definitely not natural colors. And the Arabic tradition knows about 14 horse colors. Some of them are variations of gray, some of them are variations of black. And I think 3 colors for chestnut, according to whether they have blonde hair, blonde mane. But no, the value, I mean, everybody knows a gray horse is more expensive, but these days a black horse is more expensive in the Arab horse world. I think it varies over time, what is available and like.
It's very interesting that even in Europe, over time, you have different judgments. So the one I mentioned is just one. There is also suggestions that a black horse, a bright, dark bay horse with a white mark is actually also very valuable. So if it doesn't have any marks, then it's demonic horse. It's the lowest of the hierarchy. If it does have a white mark, then it's valuable. And then I think it was in Italian source where they said that the gray horse is useless, which I don't have a reference exactly, but I was so surprised because normally I have gray horse, which is at the top, and dappled gray is the next one. And then I think it was an Italian translation of Bayard or reworking of Bayard where they say the gray horse is just useless.
Well, from actually, experience, a gray horse is very inconvenient.
That it is. Speaking of markings, by the way, in Latvian folklore, there is a belief that there is a magic way to put white markings on a foal which is going to be born. You have to put a gloved hand onto the pregnant mare part where you want the marking to be.
Wow. How do you know the marking will be in the proper place? What if it's under the tail?
Well, you put it on where you want it to be on the foal, and you put it on its mother.
Okay.
Like so.
Okay, that's very interesting.
Well, given the special significance of gloves, or rather mittens, in Latvian tradition, maybe it was supposed to be this festive mitten, which has all these magical symbols all over it. Maybe.
Well, some people have mentioned the Saints and Sinners publication that's coming up. I'm looking for this volume into there is this story, it's going around in the West, of the blooded shoulder Arabian. There's even a thoroughbred that was called the blooded shoulder Arabian, the bloody shoulder, I think. And I started thinking, like, where does this story come from? Because it's an interesting story. Somebody bleeds on his horse, and then a foal gets born with this mark. So it's sort of like, it's transferable kind of energy, or like.
I believe it's caused from a parasite, actually. I think that's been the finding, is that bloody shouldered horse is, yeah, there you go. Caused from a parasite. I could be wrong, but I thought that maybe, yeah.
Well, what it basically is a marking. So many of these horses that have been tested, they have Sabino genes. So instead of being the spot under the belly, they get them like on their face or on them. And actually in Egypt, I met a horse that was black with the white bloody shoulder. So it also happens in other colors. So it's not really like a real color or something like that. And so yeah, I was looking into that, and this story does not exist in Arabic sources, which is really, really strange. So yeah, I decided to dig a bit further, but you guys have to wait for the publication to like find out what happens with that, where it comes from.
We will. We will.
Yes.
I was gonna say, to what Kate was saying about the parasites, that's the blood sweating horses of Fergana, so like the Turkey and Teki types, and that is so with that they have connected it to a parasite that lives along the rivers that run through the Karakum Desert and stuff. And because the horses tend to be so thin-skinned and have these more hollow hairs, they do take on this sort of like bloody, sweaty appearance. But yeah, so there is a parasite connection as well, but it's different than the Arab shoulder tradition.
Oh, cool.
Gotcha. Yeah. I also remember from the like special markings from reading Sham about the prophet's thumb mark, and I've always had horses with prophet's thumb marks, like different markings, physical markings on horses and whorls and stuff.
Well, the Arab tradition is crazy about whorls and markings. I mean, I have a supplement to one of the books that's like 30 pages discussing what it means if his leg is this wide or this much or like this much or so yeah. And actually in response to Edgar's remark, if your horse has 3 white legs but the right front is not white, this means it's a bad horse. You should not buy it. But if it has 3 white legs and the left front is not white, it's the most excellent horse you can buy. So there's like all of this, like this is good, this is bad, and the same is for whorls. But for colors, no, it's not really related to colors.
You can desperately check which right leg of Esmeralda isn't white because she's got 3 white legs.
There's
no way.
There's a Mongol tradition. There's a Mongol thing as well, almost like the bloody shoulder type mark as well. These interesting, and again, it has to come back to color. But it's almost similar to what Hylke is describing with the sort of bloody shoulder marks, where you get these sort of, and they often tend to be like the Dun gene horses, and they get like this weird dark mark that almost, it looks like scarring, but it's not, like it's the coat pattern on their shoulders as well. And it's considered super auspicious and, you know, folk tales and stuff like that as well. So. Yeah.
Well, it also really depends because actually Miriam helped me with this one. When you read the letters, the English letters discussing this horse, it is also like really much like, how do you read it? Was this horse born chestnut and then part of him didn't go gray? Or was he actually born with the mark? I mean, it's not apparent from the text in the letters. So it's like, and this is where I started realizing maybe all of this is not very much connected. I mean, maybe there's some like gaps in the storyline, so.
I was going to make a comment about how I think it's so striking about the cross-cultural parallels in horse decor and marking. And you have it, you know, all over the old world, but then as well in the new world with many, many different American Indians marking horses in different ways, having ideas about auspicious colors. And, you know, that seems to be kind of an indigenous tradition that develops, you know, unrelated to perhaps the Spanish decor. I'm not sure if the Spanish colonists had any sort of decor on their war horses. I know they were heavily decorated, but I think that what is striking is that we're all a bunch of superstitious people with horses because we're trying to protect them, protect ourselves, you know, wish for good luck in the future. You know, make all sorts, if you watch jockeys before races, everybody's doing all sorts of multiple crosses and all different things that they do. I think that there's something about the nature of horsemanship and horse care that makes us, you know, prone to superstition in ways that maybe other people aren't. So I thought that was a kind of a nice parallel to all of these papers.
I always thought that soldiers were the worst, but of course it's a dangerous occupation. Maybe it has to do something with the feeling of control. You did whatever you could, yeah. And now the rest is in like God's hands, whatever.
I have a story that combines the soldiers and the horse superstition, and so it's from Greece during the Ottoman occupation. And so Ottoman soldiers were like coming through this village, and there was a famous saddler there who, you know, made all of the saddles for the sort of local Greek cavalry and stuff. And so he would work these apotropaic symbols into the saddles when he was doing the stitching and the beading and stuff to, you know, protect the soldiers. And so these Ottoman soldiers came in and they're like, give us your saddles, damn it, blah, 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 blah. You need to make us blah, blah, blah by this time or we'll kill your family. So he did, but he just didn't put the protective symbols on and they all got killed and they rode off to war. So.
I actually have from the, I believe this is a Hungarian bridal decoration. It's supposed to be a fly thing, but it's got the evil eye. And I think that this might stem from Ottoman occupation as well. I think that that's how that entered into Hungary. But this is kind of a common, you know, if you look for Baroque, you know, bridalry that is Hungarian in origin, you almost always see this evil eye in one or two different permutations.
Evil eye is not limited to Middle East as well. It's
no, I don't think so.
Although it's very prevalent here in Russian world, which was under Russian influence, so at one time or another. But then again, they could have gotten it from the Tatars.
Yeah, well, as I wrote in this disc chat, it's here there is a superstition that you should take a red thread. Should be wool or it could be cotton, so natural material, shouldn't be nylon thread. If it's a human who just gets sick, for example, a child who gets sick a lot with some stupid diseases, and you wrap it around the finger like a ring, basically, or you can have a bracelet.
Yeah.
If it's a horse which gets all kinds of stupid injuries and health problems all the time, and supposedly someone looked at your horse with a greedy eye, and you put this thread, you kind of make a small braid, but you should put it somewhere where people wouldn't see it. It shouldn't be auspicious, so it's not like for a kicking horse, because also here you would put a red ribbon onto a kicking horse and a green ribbon onto a young horse, and there are other kinds of ribbons for like moody mares and something, but that's something where people should see it, for example in competition, and it should be very prominent. Now the red thread, which is against the evil eye, should be somewhere in the middle. And I have seen several people who are kind of today who have been doing this, so I mean it's a really cheap budget way to make sure your horse doesn't.
The funniest part, one of them was a vet.
Yeah, one of them was actually a vet student who didn't believe in homeopathy. She told me she doesn't believe in homeopathy, but apparently she believes in this. She said, "I am going." After her horse got another injury, nail in his hoof, she said, "I am having no nonsense anymore. I am doing this."
Well, if you guys want to hear the story, because I prepared, like, if I didn't take up too much time to tell you the story of why I started believing in the evil eye, and for me it's not really related to Islam, because I don't know if you guys want to. I mean,
well, we've got 15 minutes. There was a question from Marian about the good or bad luck. White market is considered to be good or bad luck, but you can answer both and tell your story.
Well, maybe you could send me an email or reach out to me on social media, because I could just send you the list, because I made it into some tables where you can see like the socks are mean what, because there's also like meanings for one little sock on this particular leg or wig sock on another particular leg. So to go over all of them would be like, yeah, we could do a few hours.
You could share it with me as well. I'm just interested to see how it works.
Yes, I know everybody's dying for me to do our world talk.
Yes.
Yes.
Because apparently words are only something you can read about in Arabic culture. People were asking me about like European texts and worlds. Well, I have never
specific. There are 32 worlds, and they all have like you need to look at all of them if you're buying a horse to make sure that all of them are going the right way or are present. So
wow.
So yeah, it's but no, the story of because this is like part of the story of the Kaleda, or the necklace, or the evil eye beads, was in my master's thesis, because I was doing research on how much of the knowledge we have on horses and how to keep them in the Quran and the core hadith works is also practiced by breeders across the Middle East. So I went to visit a couple of very prominent breeders of Arab horses, but also of like local horses. And I asked them some questions. And I found that some of them, even though I had seen their photos online with horses wearing necklaces, would deny the use of necklaces. So then I started thinking, why would they deny this? I mean, it's there. And when I interviewed them, and of course I'm recording it, so they're a bit like, I mean, everybody in the Middle East is afraid of recording material. This is like, it's very difficult to get in with it and have permission, but then also your subjects are like probably scared. So a few people on record, they would like, no, I never do this. And you can just see the beads hanging above the stables behind them. I mean, if it was a video, they would be liars on camera. And then one of them was telling me like, look, this is superstition. We are allowed to believe in the eye because it's evident from the sources, but actually believing that a stone has power to ward it off is superstition, which is not allowed. So then I started thinking, like, why would we do this then? And then the problem is, like, when you first encounter an evil eye, like for me, it was a bit like, yeah, whatever. I mean, yeah, people get jealous, but what does that do to me? I mean, so what happened is that I was also breeding horses in the Middle East. I had a mare. She was very pregnant. She gave birth. She had this really beautiful little colt. And of course, I was really happy. I was never going to part with my first homebred colt. As any breeder, probably, you know, you keep the first one. So this colt started growing up, started really turning into a beautiful horse. I mean, the first year they're a bit of an ugly duckling, and then suddenly they become very pretty, very exotic. And he was graying out. And then I had this lady come over, because that's what happens if you breed horses in the Middle East. Other breeders will come visit you and like just look around. I mean, you're just sniffing each other's products, basically, I think. So this lady, she came and she looked at all of the horses, and I was not really making a show for her. So I was like, yeah, you could just look around in the boxes. I'm not like gonna buff up all of them and take them out. So, and she stopped at this colt and she said, oh my God, this one, I want to buy this one. So I told her he's not for sale. And she's like, no, what's your price? Name your price. I was like, no, he's not for sale. He's my first like colt and I want to keep him and he's going to be my riding horse and he's not for sale. So, and then she just didn't say anything anymore, but she kept looking at him. So in the next 24 hours, I lost this colt. We did an autopsy and there was nothing. He didn't have anything. There was no illness. There was nothing. He just died. And then I was shocked, of course. And of course, at first, I never thought about the evil eye. But then I started talking to my breeder friends, and this lady had been visiting other breeders. One of them, she was interested in their breeding stallion, and she specifically asked on the phone to see this horse. And she kept like, and the guy was like, no, I take him out only on these and these days. He's not like, I'm not going to just buff him up and, you know, show him to everybody who comes by. So what happened is she only asked about him on the phone. Within 24 hours, this horse had 24 stitches in his face. She visited another breeder, like the same person. She visited another breeder, and in front of them, one of the mares that she had asked to see had an accident with the fence, which resulted in a broken shoulder, and this mare, she survived, but of course always had medical problems after. So this is when I started realizing there's some kind of pattern. And this is what people tell you. Some people, they give you the bad eye, and they always give you the evil eye. It's like connected to the person. There's sort of kind of this envy or jealousy or, well, bad energies connected to a person. So this is not the only encounter I had where I would say like, okay, I think this is the bad eye, but you can see how it strikes something. You get struck by it, and there's like no reasonable explanation for it. So I started thinking like, okay, maybe I should start buying blue beads and hang them, you know, above my horses, because what do you do? I mean, you get afraid when you start realizing that this might happen to you, and you don't know who is like that. I mean, most people in the Middle East, when they visit you, they will say for each horse, "MashaAllah, may God protect this." So they convey to you like, I mean no harm. I have no intention of like taking this horse from you or hurting it or whatever. This lady specifically never said any of that. So there is a bit of like, sometimes I remember we were in this kind of conversations where we start saying, no, that one you shouldn't let come to your farm. I think it has an evil eye. So it's like you don't really believe in it rationally, but things happen to you and then you sort of start believing it. So I carry an Egyptian scarab in the color blue, which I bought off some weird guy from the pyramids, and I keep it in my bag at any times. And you feel like you want to have the bead or an amulet or something like that. And I remember that when one of my most precious mares got ill the first time during her pregnancy, I started painting her hair with henna, just to, like, you know, everybody around you starts saying, you should make her wear the beads, we should hang the beads on her. So you also get influenced by your surroundings, and then you find yourself suddenly saying, okay, I think there is an evil eye. And to me, it really feels a little bit like the eye from The Lord of the Rings. Like, it could just stalk you from anywhere. You should just really hold on to your plate, because if anybody would like to have your, you know, everybody I think had this. Like when you're holding your plate and somebody's looking at it, very spiteful or something, and then suddenly you just drop it, or there's like an accident where your spoon just falls and you try to grab it and everything falls, or these kind of things. I've had this with, I promised somebody to cook a special Egyptian dish, and then this person was so excited about it and like kept texting me and stuff like that. I dropped the whole salt pot in it, and so we couldn't eat it. So yeah, I started believing in this evil eye.
Also, interesting observation, if I may. If by saying that God protected to the horses, they're not just showing that they don't mean any harm. They're probably showing they are God-fearing persons, because there is this connection as well with the signs of the cross. And as I was telling in my piece, how do you steal horses from the water spirit? You run around them with an icon.
Yeah.
The other thing is, here it's believed you shouldn't praise a child or an animal which belongs to another, like a horse. You should curse it. You should say, "Oh, it's such a rotten child, such a bad horse," and this way you show that you're not greedy. So it's kind of because it's believed that you may harm, you may bring this bad luck without meaning specifically, because it just happens. There are some people to whom it just happens. So if you curse this and say, "Oh, it's such a bad fall," you're not going to have this greedy energy stuck in.
Well, it is on the level of verbal tick, and it is in our culture. If you have something important like an exam, and somebody wishes you good luck, you say go to hell.
Yeah, break a leg. Yeah.
Yes. You here in Russian, you literally say go to hell, go to the devil.
Yeah.
Yes, you are supposed to curse this person who is taking an exam. You say, "I'll be cursing you over this time."
Yeah, and in Arabic, for example, if a friend of mine was getting married and I am to like meet the person of the other, for example, a female friend of mine is getting married. When I first meet her other half, I will say in Arabic, God has meant for you two to be together. So very specifically, you two together. So it's like, I will not go interfere. And it's like this, it's very strong. Arabs feel very strong. If you don't say that, it's like bad luck immediately. So it's like a sort of an etiquette for these kind of situations where you're supposed to make sure that you wish them all of the luck in the world and back down on your personal feelings on what's happening.
There is also here, it's like what you mentioned about these amulets, which you use on your horse, but you deny.
Yeah.
It's a bit similar here. You shouldn't, if you go to church, if you're a churchgoer, you shouldn't put these red threads over your fingers. But then there is another thing. If you're a churchgoer, you can use holy water to sprinkle on your horse, and that's all right.
And the bit about holy water is actually in the historical sources.
Yeah.
There is this bit in the accounts of the Jesuits who were coming here after. Well, there is a long story. I'll put it in the article. But they tried to reconvert what's now Latvia to Catholicism from Protestantism.
And they found out in the process that they are pagan still.
And yes, and they basically found that people, the first rejoiced. They're so happy to see Catholic priests. And they are so keen to take holy water. And then they learned why they need the holy water for. One of the records was that a person took holy water from us to cure his horse. It doesn't specify how, unfortunately, unlike the case with fishing nets, which included preparation of the potion where holy water was only one of the ingredients.
So you boil some herbs in the holy water?
You seek out a wise woman who knows which herbs to boil with holy water, and then you put it on the fishing nets, and then no storms of big fish will tear it.
Yeah, very nice. So,
and somehow you also apply holy water to horses and treat it it from whatever happened to this horse, because the account literally says that this man, prior to using holy water, lost many horses on his travels.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so, and it's still today, if you have a friend who is kind of a Christian, so he's not going to put the red wool and the red use advice, and I've heard this advice to me, so you give you some holy water to drink to a horse.
Oh, really?
That's the authorized way.
Well, I know a guy in Kuwait, and he's like so rich that basically he has no worries and he can do whatever he wants. And I don't know if you guys know of the Zemzem source. It's like the source where Hagar got water for Abraham to drink, which is close to Mecca. And it is a natural spring, basically. So what they do is there's bottled water, and you can buy it basically everywhere in the world. You can buy Zemzem water. So this guy, he imports water from Saudi Arabia. It's not the same as holy water, but it's like you feel closer to like the religious tradition and to the prophets, because even Abraham is so much further back than Muhammad in time, but they still have this very strong chain of prophets, and that they are very important to the Islamic tradition. So this guy, he imports Zemzem water for his horses to drink, and he has like 300 horses. It's a really crazy story. But he thinks this is why his breeding program is much better than other people's breeding program.
Obviously.
Obviously, because these horses, they drink like supernatural water.
Well, so, we are in a country which puts the ancient holy tree on its money. So when we had our own money, of course.
Yeah, we had
those guys with the
5 lat.
Yeah, when we had our own currency for lats, the 5 lat note, the most common one, had this ancient holy oak. How do you recognize the holy oak here in Latvia? It's the only tree in the big field.
And they put a picture of an actual tree, so it's a tree which still exists, or it was broken a few years ago. I don't remember, but it still exists.
Yes.
So it's an actual holy oak which they used.
I guess they have more of those, no, not just one.
Oh,
well,
so
there are
many.
more of them, but this one was the most famous one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, even if they were not that ancient to be considered actually holy, although it's also a question for a debate, you simply don't cut the single tree in your field. You tell people it's for your cattle to have some shade in the summer. You say you go to to the town council and have it listed, but you just don't touch that tree, especially if it's either an oak or a linden, because they are particularly holy. The oak is a male tree, the linden is a female tree.
Yeah, and you don't want to keep any horses under that.
Well, the main picture had this listed oak on it.
Unfortunately, horses were trying to eat some of the bark, so it had to be fenced off.
Yeah, no, my horse keeps eating the acorns. We had to like move him to the paddock where there are no acorns, because he's like, I don't know, he's a very wise horse, but when it comes to eating, he just eats anything. I think I might try cat food. He will eat that probably. So it's like.
Okay, someone was talking about superstition about renaming horses. It's considered bad luck.
Like with sea ships?
I don't know. Well, in Latvia, there is this belief that the name of the horse is what your horse is like. And the previous stable there was a horse who was named Crazia, like crazy. And the owner of the stable approached the horse owners and said, "Well, you should rename this horse." They renamed it, and the horse behaved better after that. It was a very young mare who was a bit kind of unruly, and after they renamed it to something else, which wasn't crazy, she behaved better.
Well, Spartacus is a popular name for horses here, and some of them are rebellious.
Yeah, so you should be careful. Sometimes they do rename horses. Yeah. So I don't know.
And there's this problem with Arab horses that across the Western world, they tend to get Arab names that people just look up on Google. So there is a bunch of black Arabian stallions across the world called shaitan, which means devil. And the shaitan and these kind of terms you can particularly not use for animals or people in the Arabic tradition. So there's a bunch of horses who have really weird names, where I tell people, like, look, maybe you should consider renaming this horse, especially if you're putting it on Facebook with all of these Middle Eastern breeders on there, because it just looks ridiculous.
Yeah, well, shaitan, it's also in other Eastern languages.
Well,
like
Satan.
Satan.
I think the connection is obvious.
Well,
yeah,
it's not a very nice name for a black horse.
Or any horse, or anything for that matter.
No.
Yeah, well, I have a friend who has one, and I remember that she said to me when I was in Egypt, like, you could market my horse. I said, yeah, but you have to rename him, because I cannot go to my friends and say, look, you want to breed from Shaitan?
That sounds lovely.
You'd have to be called Spawn of Satan or something, wouldn't they? Satan's seed.
Well, they make all kinds of connect. Like, they think that Arabic, because it often has combined names. They make up their own stuff. So one of the horses that is actually standing stud in Belgium and in Holland is called Achel Shaitan, which means the brother of the devil. Which is, like, really insulting, I think, but so yeah.
People want to sound more daring, owning a horse with this very daring name.
I think I agree. I think that's what it is. I think it's I can handle this devil horse. Yeah, Lucifer's a lovely name, though. I think Lucifer.
Well, we all know cats are demonic, so it's probably not a problem.
Yeah, especially if it's a black cat.
If I ever get a black cop, I'll name him Lucifer Morningstar, I guess.
Well, that Lucifer was at least charming.
Yeah.
Very, right? So,
but there is a belief, I don't know if it's universal, that if you have a black cat which is crossing your way, you will have bad luck this day, and if you go forward. But if you own a black horse, that's a good thing. You will have good luck.
well, you also have money, so.
Yeah.
Here, to attract money, you need to own a red cat.
Yeah.
A ginger.
Okay.
Well, Latvian says it brings money. Russian says it brings luck. So I think it's cultural difference. But anyway, for money.
Maybe that's why I'm not very lucky, because I always had black cats. Like,
I don't know.
when I was little, we used to have a black cat, and then I have one of myself now. So.
Well, if you have a black cat, that should bring you good luck, actually.
Black cats are lucky. If black cats cross your path, that's supposed to be really lucky. But there's a whole set of superstitions about horses with white tails, black and white horses, and taking the tails from white horses. But I can never remember which it is. Is it the white horses that are lucky and you're supposed to have a tail hair from, or is it the black and white horses? Which ones are lucky and which ones are unlucky? I think it just depends on which part of the country you live in, basically. It's all quite different. Yeah.
Yeah, in Holland, we believe if you walk underneath a ladder, that's really bad luck for 7 years. It's very specific.
Wow.
Yes, same here, but very unlucky walking under a ladder. Yeah. Breaking a mirror, of course, that's extremely unlucky.
Breaking a mirror, yes, it's ubiquitous.
Yeah, so in Holland, if you break anything, so they say shattering, so it's glass or a mirror or something like that, they say this brings luck. So it's... And I think there's a lot of discussion whether or not the horseshoe should be upside down or up or like a little bit. Like, I think everybody has its own like.
Then there is a third version that it's either way as long as it's iron, because it keeps fairies away who don't like iron.
Yeah. I think we keep the horseshoe
If
up.
you're,
The luck stays.
yeah, if for ordinary mortals, yeah, I think you can keep the horseshoe up and that keeps the luck in. But if you're a farrier, you turn it the other way up and then the luck pours down upon your forge and upon you. And there are some great doors in various places. I think there's some in Ireland, there's one in Northumberland, which is in the shape of a horseshoe. Oh, and it's a forge, farrier's forge. And you actually enter the farrier's forge through under the horseshoe, basically. Yeah. I love those. I haven't got a photo, unfortunately, but I did think about doing shoes today, but I might do something a bit different.
Yeah, I wonder how luck and shoes got like attached to each other.
You have to find them as well. You can't just like buy a shoe. You have to find it on the ground.
Yeah,
You have to find it. Yes.
all the ones I have, I've been like cheating because they just like came off the horse with the farrier visit.
Doesn't count.
No, it doesn't count. We've been decorating everybody's houses with it.
Well, the one which we have hanging by the entrance you found.
Yeah, but we found it in the field where there were horses, so I mean it could be cheating as well.
But it was from the call. It's so big.
Oh, I think that's all right. That's okay.
I guess maybe it's attached to the finding then, because I remember that I had this friend in Holland. Her horse keeps losing shoes, and then she's like, "I'll be lucky if I find it again in the mud," because it's like, where did you lose it? So maybe it came from that in the search for the shoe.
Well, also iron is kind of valuable materials. You can do things from it as well. If you keep finding iron objects, it's quite good.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so some people are having to leave, and I think, well, since we said it should be 2 hours, we should be kind of wrapping up. That was an exciting discussion and a great start. It was so nice to see everyone. It's really good to see you all here. So the next seminar will be about Hippocratic treatises. We have 2 confirmed speakers, John Clark and Jennifer Jobs. So we'll talk about the problems in interpreting, reading, translating, editing Hippocratic treatises. We are looking for a 3rd speaker, so if anyone knows someone who wants to talk about Hippocratic treatises, you're very welcome to drop me a line.
Can we sign up for the other topics?
Yes, for the other topics as well. I think almost all topics have free slots.
I think, yes, we arranged them around somebody's idea, so there is 1 slot taken definitely, but...
Well, I mean, some people just asked to do certain topics and you voted for them, so...
Well, yeah, because there are 2 that I think I could participate in as well, to show a little bit more about the Arabic material.
Okay. Yeah, so about the link should take you to the channel where you have information about seminars, but each meeting apparently will have
an individual link, because to join the channel, the Microsoft team, you have to be a registered Microsoft user with a Microsoft account.
So it's not an option for everyone, and I guess since people had problems, I will just send an individual link each time before each seminar. And Hylke, if you are interested for horse breeding, we don't have many people for that one.
Yeah, and there was
the one in December.
And the gender one, because I wrote already a chapter about gender and the whole matrilineal horse breeding concept of Arab horse breeding, so I could definitely do a little bit of a review on that.
Well, we can talk about this definitely.
Yeah, I saw something with men and stallions, so I wrote the chapter is called "The Prophet's Mares, or Are They Stallions?"
Yeah.
So.
Okay, so in our Facebook group we will create an event before each seminar, but I will also send the link via the newsletter.
Yes, and the link will be in the event, like for this one. It also was there.
Yeah. Yes. So if you don't get the link, just email me before this. Okay, and I'll send it. And this recording will be available
if it's if it goes through normally.
Yeah, if we have properly recorded it, because I don't have much experience with Microsoft Teams either. If not, we can always do it again.
Well, until recently, recording option wasn't there for the private version anyways, only for corporates.
Okay, yes. So in mid-November, I hope I'll see you all there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Bye, everyone. Thanks again.
Bye.